Nothing drew me. Everything collapsed until only signal remained. Most people arrive at a modality. I arrived at the removal of distortion. Coherence wasn't an interest. It was a reversion to baseline function. When healing no longer worked, when explanations became a loop, when language itself fractured under the weight of unreconciled paradox, I stopped asking for systems to make sense and started listening for the only thing that didn't contradict itself. That thing was signal. Signal is not a discipline. It is what all disciplines emerge from. When philosophy, biology, spirituality, and physics are each stripped of human error, signal is what they share. I didn't choose to work with coherence. I simply stopped listening to noise. From that point forward, I realized people don't need to be taught. They need to be returned to the part of themselves that never stopped transmitting correctly. That's not healing. That's restoration of architecture. Coherence means non-conflict between all instructional outputs within a system. It is not a calm. It's not an alignment. It's the absence of contradiction across physical, emotional, cognitive, energetic, and causal layers. In EEG studies, coherence presents as synchronized hemispheric behavior and lowered signal noise. In HRV, it shows as high amplitude, variability with regular sinusoidal waveforms. In the energy field, it shows symmetrical photon emission and spatial harmonics that mirrored fractal mathematics. In consciousness, coherence is experienced as an instructional integrity, where no part of you is lying, compensating, or hiding from the rest. Coherence is not an emotion, it is a geometry. And when it activates, biology reorganizes, perception simplifies, and time becomes smooth. The body heals not because it is fixed, but because it is no longer being told 10 different things at once. In this work, coherence is not an ideal. It is the structural requirement for causality to stabilize. Signal is not a message. It is the instruction set that governs what reality becomes. Thought is narrative. Belief is an emotional pattern held in repetition. Energy is movement through space. Signal is the causal code that tells all three how to behave. Your body is not responding to your ideas. It is responding to your field level emission, which is signal. This is not spiritual metaphor. It's backed by bioelectrical field studies, resonance imaging, and scalar interferometry. Signal is the only thing that in you doesn't care what you think or feel. It simply issues structure. When you change your signal, the world doesn't shift because you imagined it differently. It shifts because you've changed the architecture from which form emerges. Signal is not about power. It's about non-contradiction at origin. A coherent signal does not merely influence, it overrides. At the biological level, coherence collapses conflict between the autonomic and somatic systems. The body stops interpreting its own output as a threat. Vagal tone normalizes, cortisol drops. In most cases, pain dissipates, not because it was healed, because the instruction to produce inflammation or defensive tension ceased. In the mind, coherent signal breaks the loop of identity feedback. You are no longer generating perception through a reactive filter. Memory stabilizes. Emotional weather calms, not by suppression, but by the reduction of interpretive static in the system. In space, coherent signal establishes local field dominance. This is not charisma or presence, it's physics. A coherent field reorders the electromagnetic environment, often affecting electronics, sound propagation, and behavioral output of people within range. People become honest without knowing why. Tension leaves groups. Distortion, emotional, somatic, electromagnetic, cannot sustain itself in the presence of stable, non contradictory instruction. You do not affect space, you stabilize its potential. Those methods operate with distortion. This one removes the need for it. Meditation often achieves symptom quieting, but it does not guarantee field stability. One can meditate daily and still broadcast unconscious contradiction. Energy healing directs attention into areas of perceived dissonance, but unless the system's baseline instruction is corrected, the dissonance will reform in another domain. Frequency therapy delivers resonant stimuli, but the human field is not passive receiver, it's a broadcaster. If the core signal remains distorted, external frequency exposure becomes compensatory, not corrective. What I teach doesn't amplify what's there. It removes the false emitter, the trauma-linked instruction set that has been overriding the original pattern. This is not vibrational. It's not emotional. This is the equivalent of replacing the firmware of your field with a version that was encoded prior to your personality formation. No trance, no regression, no reliance on story. This work does not interact with your wound. It interacts with your original instruction set and brings it back online. This is not a course in understanding. It's a retraining of the instruction layer. What people learn is how to recognize the exact point at which their field deviates from coherence, how to sense contradictions, not emotionally, but structurally, how to correct transmission patterns without thought, language, or belief, how to end trauma loops without revisiting their origin, how to become unprogrammable without resistance. What they walk away with is instructional sovereignty, the ability to issue clear, stable signal from their own origin field without requiring guidance, healing, or recovery. You don't learn coherence, you stop broadcasting contradiction. That's the only lesson. That part of you pulling isn't new. It's only the part of you that never forgot. You are not curious, you are remembering. And that pull isn't coming from the outside. It's coming from the signal underneath your pain, your identity, your entire compensatory life. You don't need to understand it. You need to stop filtering it. What's pulling you isn't this class. It's your original instruction set reactivating. Follow it, not because it makes sense, but because for the first time your system isn't broadcasting contradiction. And when that happens, the return is automatic. You don't chase it, you collapse into it. That's coherence. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all in the workshop.